If Putin launches a strike as early as tomorrow, who will actually respond? While European capitals are mired in bureaucratic disputes, Radio Liberty analysts have posed an uncomfortable question. Is Europe ready to defend itself without help from the United States? Right now, NATO is going through the most profound identity crisis since its original founding. Does a unified European army really exist as a functional force, or is it merely a political myth that will ultimately have to be paid for with national sovereignty? Watch this video until the very end to find out exactly what kind of strategic scenario the Kremlin has prepared to test the strength of NATO's Article 5. And for more details, check out our report. You're watching the Glavred channel. I'm your host, Evgeny Serov. Please like and subscribe to the channel. The main message of the report is the growing skepticism regarding the role of the United States. The return of Donald Trump to the White House and his statements about commercializing security have forced Europe to face the reality that American soldiers may not come to the rescue in the event of a local conflict on the eastern flank. The article emphasizes that Putin sees this crack. The Kremlin's strategy in 2026 is aimed at testing whether Berlin or Paris would dare to fight for Narva or Białystok if Washington decides to remain neutral and stay on the sidelines. Radio Liberty has pointed out that collective defense today is currently dependent more upon inertia than on substantial military resources ready for immediate deployment. The idea of a unified European army has been discussed for decades, but the year 2026 became a moment of truth. The primary issue is the complete absence of a unified command center and the significant and vast differences in weaponry. France insists on strategic autonomy, while Poland and the Baltic states fear that this is just a pretext to weaken ties with the United States. A Radio Liberty article points to a critical shortage of ammunition, air defense systems, and heavy equipment in the EU countries. Today, the European defense industry is unable to sustain a high-intensity war for more than a few weeks. The European army exists only on paper, but on the battlefield it remains a collection of separate entities with their own different languages and incompatible communication standards. The Kremlin in Moscow is currently betting on hybrid scenarios that do not fall under the formal definition of war. The sabotage of communication cables, cyber attacks on banking systems, and the use of migration crises as a strategic weapon. All of this is already happening right now, but the main argument remains the threat of nuclear blackmail. The article raises the question, does Europe have its own nuclear shield? French and British military forces are not sufficient for fully deterring Russia on a global scale. Without American missiles in Germany and Poland, Europe remains vulnerable to missile terror, which Putin resorts to every time the situation reaches a deadlock. The future of NATO is hanging by a thread. The year 2026 will show whether Europe can finally grow up and take full responsibility for its own fate, or whether it will instead become a battlefield in the great game of superpowers. What do you think? Should Europe create its own unified army separate from the United States? Or would that only serve to accelerate the collapse of NATO? The front is on the verge of its greatest test. While world leaders discuss diplomatic scenarios, the fate of these regions is being decided in eastern Ukraine. According to the latest reports, Russia has come dangerously close to capturing 3 key cities that form the backbone of our defense. What will happen if these strongholds fall? What plan has the General Staff prepared to stop the enemy's advance? And why could the next 48 hours prove decisive for the entire year 26? Now we will analyze the battle map, which leaves no room for illusions. Watch until the end. Everyone needs to know this. Well, you'll find more information in our report. My name is Yevhen Serov. This is the Glavred channel. Subscribe and give us a like. Let's get started. The media, citing reports from analysts and war correspondents, highlight 3 critical directions. The first is Pokrovsk. It is the largest logistics hub, and its loss would cut off the main railway and road routes that supply our troops in the north of the region. The second is Mirnorad, a city on commanding heights. If the enemy secures a foothold here, the entire Kramatorsk-Sloviansk agglomeration will come under direct fire. And third, in the Zaporizhzhia region, Hulyaipole. Here, the situation is most critical due to the threat of encirclement. Russia is throwing everything it has into battle, from elite paratroopers to endless waves of mobilized soldiers. They are using the tactic of total destruction of urban areas with glide bombs and heavy artillery. Why has the assault become so frenzied right now? Analysts emphasize the Kremlin is in a hurry. Putin needs a significant success on the ground before Western aid from the newly promised 2026 packages reaches the front in full. The occupiers are ignoring record losses in equipment and manpower. Moscow's main goal is to force Kyiv and the West to negotiate from a position of weakness, having control over these three cities. Essentially, we are witnessing an attempt at a final push before the spring mud, and the exhaustion of reserves force the enemy to switch to defense. But the situation is not hopeless. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine states, every meter of advance costs the enemy hundreds of lives. Our units have switched to a tactic of active defense, making maximum use of FPV drones and robotic platforms to mine the enemy's advance routes. The article notes that fresh reserves have already been deployed to the areas of Pokrovsk, Chasiv Yar, or Mirnohrad. The key issue now is ammunition. If the artillery receives the necessary amount of shells, the supposed proximity to capture, as claimed by enemy propaganda, could turn into yet another disaster for them at the walls of Ukrainian cities. 3 cities, 3 shields of Ukraine. The battle for them is raging right at this very moment. We must understand, the situation is extremely difficult, but our soldiers are accomplishing the impossible.